You didn't stumble onto this video. The algorithm didn't randomly suggest it. And if you think it's a coincidence that you're here right now, reading these words at this exact moment in your life, then you haven't been paying attention to how the universe actually works. Because here's the thing about spiritual timing. It doesn't care about your schedule, your logic, or your doubts. It only cares about readiness. And something inside you just crossed a threshold you didn't even know existed. See, the universe operates on a frequency most people never tune into. Not because they can't, but because they're not ready to hear what it's broadcasting. They're too busy, too distracted, too comfortable in their confusion to notice that there's a signal cutting through all the noise of their lives. But you're different. You've been asking for a sign, haven't you? Maybe not out loud, maybe not even consciously, but somewhere deep in your soul, you've been whispering the same question over and over. Is this it? Is this really all there is? And today, right now, you're getting your answer. The signal the universe sends to pure hearts isn't some mystical light show or burning bush moment. It's quieter than that, more intimate. It shows up as a feeling you can't quite explain, a pull towards something you can't quite name, a knowing that defies logic but feels more real than anything you can touch. And if you're here, if something made you stop scrolling and actually pay attention, then you've already received it. The question now is whether you're brave enough to acknowledge what it means. But let me guess what's been happening to you lately. You've been feeling off, haven't you? Not sick, not depressed exactly, just disconnected. Like you're watching your own life through glass. You go through the motions, you show up where you're supposed to show up, you say the right things to the right people. But inside, there's this growing sense that you're not where you're supposed to be. That the life you built so carefully, the one that looks good on paper, the one that everyone tells you should be grateful for, that life doesn't fit anymore. And the scariest part? You can't even remember when it stopped fitting. It just slowly became too small for who you're becoming. Your friends don't notice. Your family doesn't see it. They look at you and see the same person they've always known. But you know the truth. You know that something fundamental is shifting inside you. Something that has nothing to do with external circumstances and everything to do with internal evolution. You're in what I call the gray zone. That strange in-between space where your old self is dying, but your new self hasn't fully emerged yet. And it's exhausting in a way that sleep doesn't fix, in a way that vacation doesn't cure, in a way that no amount of self-care routines or motivational content can touch. This is what they don't tell you about spiritual growth. It doesn't feel inspirational. It feels like standing at a train station waiting for a train that's hours late, and you can't leave because you've already missed all the other connections, but you also can't see any evidence that this train is actually coming. You're stuck in this weird limbo where you're too aware to go back to who you were, but not clear enough yet to move forward into who you're becoming. And the loneliness of that, the loneliness of that is something you probably haven't told anyone about, because how do you explain that you feel alone in a room full of people who love you? How do you articulate that conversations that used to engage you now feel like nails on a chalkboard? How do you admit that you're tired of your own personality, your own patterns, your own predictable responses to everything? You thought you were breaking down. You thought something was wrong with you. You scrolled through symptoms of burnout and depression, trying to find a label that fit this feeling. But what if I told you that you weren't breaking down at all? What if this exhaustion, this disconnect, this overwhelming sense of "I can't do this anymore" wasn't a problem to fix, but a signal to decode? Because the universe doesn't prepare pure hearts for their calling with comfort and ease. It prepares them with pressure. with isolation, with a very specific kind of discomfort that forces you to confront the gap between who you've been pretending to be and who you actually are. Let me tell you what a pure heart really is, because it's not what you think. It's not about being nice or moral or spiritually superior to other people. A pure heart has nothing to do with innocence and everything to do with integrity. It's about the refusal to lie to yourself anymore, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when the truth costs you relationships and opportunities and the approval of people you used to care about impressing. Most people choose comfort over truth every single day. They build entire lives around convenient lies because facing reality would require them to change, and change is terrifying. But you're different. You reached a point where the pain of staying the same finally exceeded your fear of transformation. And that moment, that exact moment when you stopped being able to tolerate your own bullshit, that's when you became a pure heart. The universe recognizes this frequency immediately. It's been waiting for you to reach this point because it can't give certain gifts to people who aren't ready to receive them. Not because it's cruel or judgmental, but because some truths, some callings, some levels of power and purpose, they require a container that won't crack under pressure. And for years, maybe your whole life, you've been building that container through every disappointment that didn't destroy you, every betrayal that taught you discernment, every failure that revealed your resilience. You thought all of that was just bad luck or poor timing or evidence that you weren't good enough. But actually, it was preparation. The universe was testing your foundation, making sure that when it finally placed something valuable in your hands, you'd be strong enough to hold it. And here's what's happening right now, whether you realize it or not. You're moving through a very specific 4-phase protocol that every pure heart must complete before they can step into their true calling. Phase 1 already happened. That was the dismantling, when everything you thought you wanted started falling apart. The relationship that ended even though you did everything right. The job that disappeared even though you were loyal and hardworking. The friend group that dissolved even though you showed up consistently. You thought you were losing, but actually, the universe was removing everything that was blocking your evolution. Because you can't pour new wine into old wineskins, and you can't step into your next chapter while you're still clinging to the comfort of the previous one. Phase 2 is where you probably are right now. This is the void, the silence, the scary empty space where nothing seems to be happening. You've let go of what didn't serve you, but nothing new has shown up yet to replace it. You're floating in this strange in-between where you're not who you used to be, but you don't know who you're becoming. And it feels like failure. It feels like you made a mistake. It feels like maybe you should go back and try to rebuild what you had before, even though you know deep down that those doors have closed for a reason. This phase is brutal because there's no evidence that anything is working. You're making different choices, setting different boundaries, showing up differently, but externally, nothing is changing yet. And your brain, desperate for certainty, starts screaming at you to panic, to force something to happen, to do anything except sit in this uncomfortable unknown. But this is the most critical phase. This is where most people turn back. They can't handle the emptiness, the silence, the lack of immediate results. So they go back to their old patterns, their old relationships, their old coping mechanisms, because at least that pain was familiar. At least they knew how to function in that dysfunction. But if you can just stay in the void a little longer, if you can resist the urge to fill the silence with noise and distraction, something extraordinary starts to happen. You begin phase 3, the recalibration. This is where your entire value system starts to shift. Things that used to matter become irrelevant. Opinions that used to control you lose their power. Fear that used to paralyze you starts to feel more like information than threat. You're not trying to change these things. They're just naturally reorganizing themselves because you're operating at a different frequency now. And then, if you don't quit, if you keep choosing truth over comfort and growth over stagnation, you enter phase 4, embodiment. This is where the internal work finally becomes visible in your external reality. Opportunities appear that match your new frequency. People show up who recognize and appreciate this version of you. Resources flow toward you not because you're chasing them, but because you've become magnetic to them. But here's what you need to understand. You can't skip phases. You can't rush the process. And you absolutely cannot enter embodiment until you've fully completed the void, because the void is where your old identity dissolves completely. It's like the caterpillar turning into soup before it becomes a butterfly. There's a period where it's neither caterpillar nor butterfly, just liquid potential reorganizing itself at the cellular level. That's where you are. You're not failing. You're not stuck. You're dissolving so you can reform as something entirely new, but I need to warn you about something. Right now, as you're reading this, as you're starting to recognize yourself in these words and feel that spark of hope that maybe you're not crazy, maybe this is all part of a larger plan, your ego is about to launch its final attack. Because here's what happens when you get close to a breakthrough. Everything falls apart. Your car breaks down. Your bank account hits zero. Your family suddenly needs you for every little crisis. Your health flares up. Your mind floods with doubt and fear and every reason why this won't work and you should just give up. This isn't bad luck. This is the terror barrier, the ego's last stand before you cross into a version of yourself it can't control. Your old self, the one you've been for years or maybe decades, that self knows it's about to die. And it's going to fight for survival with everything it has. It's going to whisper every insecurity, replay every past failure, remind you of every time you tried and didn't succeed. It's going to make you feel crazy for believing that change is possible. It's going to send people into your life who subtly or not so subtly try to talk you out of your transformation. Not because they're bad people, but because your evolution threatens their comfort with staying stuck. When you change, when you actually become the person you keep saying you want to be, it forces everyone around you to confront their own resistance to growth. So they'll question you. They'll remind you of who you used to be and suggest that maybe this new version is just a phase or a delusion. They'll point out every risk and worst-case scenario. They'll disguise their own fear as concern for your well-being. And if you're not careful, if you don't understand that this resistance is actually proof that you're on the right path, you'll let them pull you back into the old story. Because it's easier. Because it's familiar. Because at least when you're playing small, you don't have to deal with the terror of discovering how powerful you actually are. But pure hearts don't have the luxury of playing small anymore. You've seen too much. You know too much. You can't unknow what you now understand about yourself and the universe and how this whole thing actually works. So when the resistance hits, and it will hit hard, you can't interpret it as a sign to stop. You have to recognize it for what it is, the gatekeeper test. The universe's way of asking, are you serious? Are you really ready? Or are you just another person who talks about transformation but runs the moment it gets uncomfortable? So what do you actually do when you're in the middle of this? When the old life has fallen away but the new one hasn't materialized yet? When doubt is screaming louder than faith and everything in you wants to quit? You practice radical subtraction. You stop doing things out of guilt, obligation, or the fear of disappointing people who were never really in your corner anyway. You say no without explanation or apology. You create space, massive amounts of space, because you can't hear the signal if your life is full of noise. And noise isn't just sound. It's commitments that drain you, relationships that diminish you, activities that numb you, thoughts that spiral you into fear and shame and regret. You implement what I call the power pause. When something happens, when someone demands your energy or attention or response, you don't react anymore. You pause. You breathe. You ask yourself, what would the version of me I'm becoming do right now? And then you do that, even if it feels awkward, even if it disappoints someone, even if it contradicts every pattern you've ever had. Because embodiment isn't something that happens to you. It's something you practice into existence through micro decisions that align with your new frequency instead of your old conditioning. And you start scripting your new identity. You speak as the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. When someone asks how you are, you don't complain or deflect or minimize. You say, I'm evolving, or I'm becoming, or I'm in a powerful transition. Not because you're trying to convince them, but because you're reminding yourself. Because language shapes reality. And if you keep describing yourself through the lens of your past, you'll stay trapped in it. But when you start speaking from your future, when you use words that reflect who you're becoming rather than who you've been, the universe starts rearranging itself to match that declaration. And when you do this, when you actually commit to these protocols and stop waiting for perfect conditions or external validation, something shifts. The signal that's been faint and confusing suddenly becomes clear. Not louder, just clearer. Because you've finally tuned yourself to the right frequency. And what you hear in that clarity isn't a list of instructions or a detailed blueprint. It's simpler than that. It's just knowing. You know when to move and when to wait. You know who to trust and who to release. You know what opportunities to pursue and which ones to let pass. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've finally stopped drowning out your own intuition with fear and overthinking and the opinions of people who don't understand what you're building. This is what life looks like on the other side of this transformation. You stop chasing, not because you become lazy or unmotivated, but because you realize that chasing is just fear wearing a productivity costume. You start attracting instead the right people, the right opportunities, the right resources. They find you because you've become a match for them, not through manifestation techniques or vision boards, but through the simple fact that you finally embody the frequency you've been trying to fake for years. There's no more gap between who you are in private and who you present to the world. There's no more exhausting performance of being fine when you're falling apart or pretending to be humble when you're actually proud of what you've overcome. You develop this quiet confidence that doesn't need to announce itself or defend itself or prove itself to anyone. It's not arrogance. Arrogance is loud because it's insecure. Real confidence is quiet because it doesn't need validation. You walk into rooms differently. You speak differently. Not because you're performing a new character, but because you've finally stopped performing altogether. And people feel it. They might not be able to name it, but they sense that something about you has fundamentally changed. Some of them will be drawn to it, energized by your evolution, inspired to examine their own lives. Others will be threatened by it, uncomfortable with the way your growth exposes their stagnation. And here's the most beautiful part. You won't care. Not because you've become cold or indifferent, but because you've finally accepted that not everyone is supposed to understand you, celebrate you, or accompany you into your next chapter. Some people were only meant to be part of your story for a season, and trying to force them into your next chapter only delays your own plot. So you release them with love and gratitude for whatever role they played, and you trust that the universe will send you the people who are meant to walk with this version of you. You stop needing to earn worthiness. This might be the biggest shift of all. You spent your whole life trying to prove you deserved good things: love, success, peace, happiness. You worked harder, gave more, sacrificed endlessly, all trying to accumulate enough proof that you were finally worthy of what you wanted. But worthiness isn't earned. It's inherent. You were born worthy, you just forgot. And the pure heart, that's the heart that remembers. That's the heart that stops performing for approval and starts living from authenticity. That's the heart that understands it doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful, doesn't need to have it all figured out to move forward, doesn't need permission from anyone to step into the calling that's been waiting patiently for them to be ready. You are ready, not because you have all the answers or because you've reached some arbitrary level of preparedness. You're ready because you're exhausted with being anyone other than yourself. You're ready because the pain of staying the same finally outweighs your fear of changing. You're ready because something inside you recognized itself in these words and whispered, "Yes, this, now." That whisper is the signal. That recognition is the universe confirming what your soul already knows. The pure heart doesn't wait for perfect timing. It creates timing through decisive action. It doesn't need the whole path lit up before it takes the first step. It just needs to know which direction to walk, and then it walks with certainty that the next step will reveal itself when it's needed. So if you're here, if you made it this far, if something inside you is vibrating at a frequency it's never hit before, then you already know what needs to happen next. You need to claim it. Not to me, not to anyone watching this video, to yourself. You need to make a declaration that cuts through every excuse and every doubt and every pattern that's kept you playing small. And sometimes the most powerful declaration is the simplest one. So do this with me right now. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Just say it out loud, or type it in the comments, or write it in your journal. Say, "I am pure. I receive." Those 4 words are a spiritual contract between you and the universe. They're your acknowledgement that you recognize the signal, that you accept the calling, that you're ready to step into whatever comes next without needing to control every detail. And then read the other comments. Look at how many people are saying the exact same thing. You're not alone in this. You never were. The pure hearts are everywhere, scattered across the world, going through the same dismantling, the same void, the same recalibration. You just couldn't see them before because you weren't vibrating at the right frequency. But now you are. Now you can recognize your tribe, the ones who chose truth over comfort, growth over stagnation, evolution over safety. The signal has been received. The work is done. Not the external work, that's just beginning. But the internal work, the hardest work, the work of becoming willing to change, that's complete. You cross the threshold. You move from wanting to readiness. And once you cross that line, there's no going back. Not because you can't, but because you won't want to. Because you've tasted something on the other side of fear that's more addictive than any comfort zone, more satisfying than any approval, more powerful than any pattern you've ever had. You've tasted freedom. The freedom of being exactly who you are, unapologetically, courageously, completely. And that freedom is your birthright. It always was. You just had to become pure enough to claim it.